Hey, Bastish B for 64K, and welcome to episode 4 of the Zine Files. And welcome back. If you've never watched this show, I basically go through an old computer gaming magazine or console gaming magazine. We go through, look at all the articles, discuss them, and also show tons and tons of game footage for all the games as much as possible. So on today's episode, we got another issue of Zzap64. This is October 1990, issue number 66. I really enjoyed doing the last episode, which was also a Zzap64 issue. You can check it out. I'll post links at the end of the video if you haven't already seen that episode. I've also done a couple of episodes of CMVG magazine. You can check those out too. Okay, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into this issue. Okay, so welcome to the October 1990 issue of Zzap64. If you don't know anything about Zzap64, in the 80s and 90s, it was probably the most well-known Commodore 64 magazine in the UK. It was excellent. It also covered the Amiga scene as well. And as you can see, it says Iron Man there, and you can tell by the 4x4 on the front cover. This is a conversion of the arcade game to the Commodore 64, so we'll see that review pretty soon in the mag. Below that, it says C64 Gs Console. This was Commodore's bungled attempt to turn the Commodore 64 into a gaming console. It didn't work out too well. We'll talk about that as well. And below that, you got two cool articles of the making of Special Criminal Investigation and Total Recall, both by Ocean. And if you look to the bottom left there, it says 3 complete games, 1 amazingly playable demo. So if you never grew up in the 80s and early 90s with a Commodore 64, you probably don't realize that there was an actual audio cassette taped to the front of this magazine, and used to play it through the tape deck on the Commodore. Anyway, so this had 3 full games that they gave away for free. You got Fox Fights Back, which was a really cool game, which was a full retail game a few years earlier, and I really enjoyed it. And you also got Scorpion and Monster Munch, and then they also got an excellent demo, which I remember playing all to hell back in the day, for Creatures. This game is an excellent platform game by the Roland brothers. If you've never played it, it's also a default game on the C64 Mini, so you can give that a go. It's excellent. Highly recommended. Okay, so let's get this party started and go to the first page. Okay, so on the left there, you got an advert for The Spy Who Loved Me, one of the many James Bond games that Domark made. They had the license for James Bond games in the 80s, and they made a ton of them. Most of them were quite good. I really liked License to Kill. That ended up being my favorite, I think, if I had to go through all the ones I played. The Spy Who Loved Me is really well made. It's got that kind of Ocean vibe where it's like a movie license where they take bits of the movies and cut it up into mini games. It was quite cool. I really liked it. It's definitely worth checking out. And on the right, you got the contents page. We're not going to go through this because we're going to get to everything anyway, so let's just move on. Okay, we're going to skip over these adverts and get straight to the game parts. Okay, on the left there, you got The Word. That's Zzap64's preview section, previews upcoming games and all stuff like that. And in the middle there, it says To Raise Your Attention. Now, Raise was a magazine that came out around about this time. It was covering 16-bit console stuff and computer stuff, and it was quite good. I really enjoyed it. I only read a few issues. Actually, I'll probably preview one of them in one of these Zine Files episodes eventually. Really don't know how many issues were put out, but it's quite a good mag. And on the right there, you got Battle Command for the Amiga, released by Ocean. This is part of the Carrier Command series. In this one, you go around in a tank and blast stuff up and go on missions. It had really impressive 3D graphics for the time. Well, I thought it was impressive. I think it still looks good. It's a little bit slow, but it's still quite an impressive game. I really liked it. This one's a little bit more action-y, I think. Okay, so on the left, we got right at the bottom, we got 64 GS Overshadow CD-TV. That was 2 horrible attempts by Commodore to expand the brand, and both of them didn't work out very well at all. The 64 GS, they're talking about the impending release of that thing, and that was the consoleized C64 basically. It was a bit of a mess. They tried to bring back cartridge gaming to the C64. When the C64 was originally released, there was quite a lot of cartridge games on cartridge, and then it kind of just disappeared. I'm not really sure why they disappeared. I'm guessing they were just too expensive to make. That's why they switched to tape and disc. or more accurately tape and disc were just cheaper and became more popular. And then in the middle there you got the October charts. We'll take a quick look at the first 3 from each one of these. The C64 games out at that time. Number 1 was Turrican. Number 2, The Untouchables, and number 3, Rainbow Islands. Some really great games there. On the Amiga front, you had Kickoff 2, Xenon 2, and Turrican. Some also really cool stuff. The C64 music, what these guys were considering their favorite stuff at the time. You had Ghouls and Ghosts by Tim Follin, Turbo Outrun by the Maniacs of Noise, and Batman the Movie by Matthew Cannon. Those are all really good SID tracks in those games. Excellent. You should definitely check all those out. I've covered some of these in my Wired for Sound episodes. You can check them out also. And the Amiga music, Xenon 2, Batman the Movie, and Starglider 2. Very cool stuff. And on the coin up front, you got Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, Special Criminal Investigation, and Turbo Outrun again. In case you don't know, in the early 90s, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was changed to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles because parents were freaking out that their kids were thinking ninjas were their idols and ninjas were assassins. People just had a meltdown over it, and it was changed to Hero Turtles for a while. Anyway, it ended up switching back once everything died out, but that's the reason why it's called Hero Turtles there. And on your right, you got Nightbreed the action game. Okay, so Nightbreed is based on a movie by Clive Barker. It came out for all the 16-bit and 8-bit systems at the time. They made 2 games out of this. This is the action game, exactly what it says it is. It's a side-scrolling like action game with like some light puzzle elements, I guess. It was okay. I mean, it's not a bad game. It's not like the worst game ever made. It's average. And then there was another one, I believe it was called the Interactive Movie or something like that, and it was more of like an adventure game. I think that was only on the 16-bit platforms. I don't think it was released on the 8-bit formats. I never played that, so honestly I can't really say much about it. It did look kind of cool though. Okay, so here's the game from the front cover. Ivan Iron Man Stewart's Super Off-Road Racer, the conversion by Virgin Games to the Commodore 64 and the Amiga. If you've never played this game, it's essentially a racing game. This is like the off-road version. It's very cool, can upgrade your car. It's excellent. The C64 version was a single loader, so it works really well on the C64 Mini. If you've never played this game, you should try it out. The Amiga version is almost perfect conversion of the arcade game. Well, I felt it was when I played it originally. Okay, so on the left we got the review for Flimbo's Quest on the Commodore 64 and Amiga. This is a pretty cool game by System 3. They didn't usually make these kinds of games. This like a side-scrolling platform game. That wasn't really what they usually did, but this game was really cool. The gameplay is a bit repetitive, just like what Zzap said about both versions. I agree with that. If you've ever played the game Hawkeye, it plays very similar to that. It's like side-scrolling levels, and you look for a certain creature and kill it, and move on, and there's like bonus stages. You can collect coins, Mario Brothers style, and some upgrade shops between levels. The presentation is really good. I really love the music as well. I think it was by Jerome Tell or Maniacs of Noise. Another really cool game by System 3. And if you look to your right, you got Fire and Forget 2, The Death Convoy. This is another conversion of an arcade game. I honestly never saw this in the arcade at all. The thing you should look out for here is that at the bottom, if you see, it's made by Titus. That is a really bad indication of what this game is going to be like. Came out on all the major PC formats as well as 8-bit computers, and I played the Commodore 64 version, which is shown there in the video. It is terrible. I would not recommend playing this game. In fact, for the most part, you should just avoid anything that has the Titus logo on it. Okay, so on the left you got a review for Satan by Dynamic. Dynamic was a pretty cool company. I think they're really underrated. I really liked their Army Moves game. I thought that was a really fun, well-made game. It's really difficult though, and that's what they pretty much say about Satan here. The Satan I never actually played before. The graphics look really nice. They say the graphics are very good on both versions, but the gameplay is very repetitive and it's super difficult. I'm just going by other Dynamics games that I've played, and they all are very difficult games, so I'm assuming that's correct. I mean, Navy Moves, the first level alone is like one of the hardest first levels of a game I've ever played. A bit of a pity, you know, when they make games that are so difficult, I don't think these programmers realize that nobody's going to see the rest of their game, so they kind of just wasted their time. Anyway, and on your right you got this TNT collection. This is released by Domark. This is a whole bunch of Atari arcade games in this pack. You got a really good selection here. You got Hard Driving, Zzap, Dragon Spirit, APB, and Tubin. I've played all these games before, but I've played them in all different formats. The Commodore 64 versions I've played here are Zzap, even though it looks like a Spectrum game. It plays quite well compared to the arcade game. Dragon Spirit as well. Played it on the Amiga, and Tubin also on the Amiga. Tubin's okay, I guess. Not the greatest game. At least I don't think so. Hard Driving on the Amiga is also a pretty good conversion. It was a powerhouse of an arcade game back in the day. Racing game. It's a pretty good overall collection, I think. Okay, so on the left we got Deliverance, which is Stormlord 2, and I really enjoyed it. It's a tough game. It's a little bit slow in the gameplay department. I still think they're quite good games if you can get past the extreme difficulty, which you find in most of these old games. Zzap gave it a 79 overall. For the most part, they had pretty good things to say about it, besides the extreme difficulty, and maybe it's a little bit repetitive. Good game. Another great game from Houston. And on your right, you got Puppy Saga by Ubisoft. I played this on the Amiga, and it looks like it's pretty much the same kind of thing. They gave it 37%, which is terrible. They said it's just a repetitive Gauntlet clone, which the game is kind of like Gauntlet. Mediocre graphics, mediocre everything. It's not even worth playing. 37. I think that pretty much says it all. Okay, so on the left you got a review for Monty Python's Flying Circus. If you don't know that, it's the crazy British comedy troupe from the 60s and 70s and 80s. They made a game out of this thing. Don't ask me how, but yeah, they did. Anyway, it's basically like the little cartoon sketch pieces that happen between the skits. They made that into a game. I only played the Amiga version. I had a demo disc. It was on the front cover of a issue of Commodore User. That's how I played it, so I've never actually played the full game. I've only played the demo. Side-scrolling shoot-'em-up action mixed with some basic shoot-'em-up levels, and that's about it. I remember the sound and all that was pretty cool. Zzap did not like this game at all. They gave it 47 on the C64 and 57% on the Amiga. They said it's just repetitive and the graphics are mediocre. And on the right you got that Dick Tracy game. Unfortunately, if you look down to the bottom there, it's got the good old Titus logo. Now bear in mind this is a different game than the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive game, which is completely different, and it's also completely different than the NES game. So there's a lot of different versions of this game. This is the good old Titus one. It's terrible as per usual, so unfortunately I love Dick Tracy, but this is just a piece of garbage. Okay, so on the left you got a review for Atomics. It's just your standard puzzle game. I'm not a big fan of the genre, I'm just going to be honest about it. This is the C64 one, got 76%, so did the Amiga one. They said it's pretty good. I'm not going to really get into this game because I don't really like it, so there's going to be a few games here which I'm just going to skip over quickly. If you like puzzle games though, give it a go. Otherwise, let's just move on. Okay, here's the Zzap Rap section. It's basically their letter section. We'll get to the one that I found pretty interesting. It's called Hot Games here, and it says, Dear Lloyd, I would like to start off by congratulating you on the brilliant mag. I've recently arrived in Denmark from South Africa and found that piracy is legal here. I find it very strange, and when most of the world, especially Europe, are trying to combat piracy, a few countries here are actually promoting it. There's a local newspaper here in Denmark that has a section that allows people to sell pirated games as long as they are sold above, that is, £1.80. Yeah, I could buy games such as Rotox, Unreal, and Turrican for only £1.80, and sometimes even before their announced release dates. Then there are a few piracy companies as well. The newest one is called Amiga Software Denmark. They have monthly newsletters, and for just 300 kroner or £27, you can receive 30 discs with all the latest games for that month. Basically, Zzap's response is that, the UK companies can't do anything about it because it's in a different country. It's taking place in Denmark. So that's about it. So if they wanted to pirate it up, then that's the way it was. And that's how I received a lot of my games in the 80s. I mean, I had a lot of originals, but I'm sure like everybody else, you had a whole ton of pirated games as well. It was just the nature of the beast back then. That's just the way you got to play stuff. And on the right there it says Chase 2 gets turbocharged. So this is basically a preview for the then upcoming SCR game, Special Criminal Investigations, or Chase HQ2, a game which came out on, I think, cartridge initially because it was such a big game. Okay, and here's more of their preview for Special Criminal Investigation. They have a full interview with the guys that were making it, and they got the job because of their excellent turbo outrun conversion to the Commodore 64, and they talk about how they were having difficulty trying to squeeze all these massive sprites and that into this game while still making it run fast and stuff like that. It's a pretty interesting read. I like the way this game came out. It came out pretty good, I think. It's a bit difficult, but that's just the usual for back in the day. Anyway, I made a C64 video, top 10 racing destruction games. Anyway, I just released that a couple of weeks ago, so you can check it out. That game is featured in the top 10. The C64 version of the original Chase HQ was absolutely horrendous, so this kind of balances the tables just a little bit. Okay, so on your left you got an advert for Robocop 2 based on the awesome movie, and this is by Ocean, obviously. Now this game there's so many different versions of Robocop 2, the game. I think every single version of this game is different. The NES one's different, the Commodore 64 one's different, the Amiga one is probably my favorite. It's the graphics and sound are just excellent. Such a fun side-scrolling shoot 'em up. Commodore 64 one is also really cool. I always thought it was. And on your right you got a preview. Zzap started doing these previews a lot more frequently at this point. I don't remember them doing these kinds of elaborate previews of games a few years earlier. But anyway, this is a preview for the excellent game Creatures by the Roland Brothers. Go over to the next page and check a little bit more out about this game. So if you don't know, Creatures is a really excellent side-scrolling kind of platform game with some puzzle elements when you go into the torture screens. I don't want to ruin too much about it. It's an excellent game. It's a game that's available on the C64 Mini also as a default, so you definitely have no excuse not to check this one out. It's excellent. The graphics and music is phenomenal. They talk to Steve, who did the music. He's one of the Roland Brothers, and he's talking about how he keeps on getting sidetracked by when he's making music and ends up making other tracks that he knows will eventually get into some game, or maybe that game in some sort of part. I thought it was pretty cool. And they also mention how they're so far behind in making Creatures, but Thalamus were totally a cool company and they totally understood it, and they just wanted them to make a great game. They didn't care if it was delayed by a couple months, as long as it was good. It's pretty cool information. And on to the next page. Okay, so on the left you got an advert for Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Game came out on pretty much everything, consoles and computers at the time. Pretty popular game, and everybody knows this thing. Probably best known as the NES game, the top-down / side-scrolling action game. And on the right you got Budget Blitz. So this is where all the budget games were reviewed, games that were sold for really cheap prices, and also re-releases. A lot of re-releases at this time in the Commodore's life. So one of the re-releases there, Daley Thompson's Olympic Challenge to the right there. That's another one of those multi-event kind of sports games. This is the second Daley Thompson game. They made 3 of them, and the first one was pretty much a rip-off of track and field. Anyway, this one's similar. I remember the graphics are really good in this game, and you could go into the gym and pump yourself up before the race and make the more you worked out, the more you can fill up these Lucozade bottles, and then you can use them in whatever event you're going to partake in, and it'll boost your energy and give you a better shot at it. So it had a little bit of some little added extra touches that these games usually didn't have. I thought it was quite good. And at the bottom you got First Strike. This game was really cool. It's kind of best described as Afterburner, but it's a lot more than that. You can choose your weapons, all that at the beginning of each level. It's really fun. The graphics are good, it's fast, it's made by Elite, and they made just tons of really good kind of racing, flying, this kind of style of game, like Buggy Boy and Live and Let Die. Very similar style. They said they probably should have rated it higher when it was originally released, because it's just as good now as it ever was, and it's 1,000 times better than the Commodore 64 version of Afterburner, which if you played the US or the PAL version, you would probably definitely agree that this is way better. Okay, so on the left you got more budget stuff. You got Salamander. It's being re-released by the Hit Squad. This is based on the excellent Codename arcade game. The C64 version of Salamander is brilliant. I thought it was absolutely excellent. I played the hell out of this back in the day. It's a side-scrolling shoot 'em up. It's part of the Gradius series. This version, I think, is by far the best 8-bit version out there. And if you look down to the left, you got another arcade conversion, Rastan Saga. It's also re-released by the Hit Squad. This game is not very good at all. I never liked it when I played it back in the day. I played it recently to capture the footage here that you've seen. It's a really bad game. It's super slow and sluggish. The music's quite cool though, as with most Commodore 64 games. Is it that the Commodore 64 one's bad, or is it that the arcade is just a mediocre arcade that has been converted from? I think it's a bit of both, but whatever. And to the right, if you look at that big, nice, awesome advert for Operation Stealth. This is by Delphine Software. These guys just make excellent games. They made excellent games like Cruise for a Corpse, Future Wars, an excellent point-and-click adventure, and probably their most famous game is Flashback. And this is a point-and-click adventure game. Just bear in mind that this game goes under the name James Bond, The Stealth Affair in North America, so you might have played this, but this is the European version. It's just called Operation Stealth. The only difference is that it's got like a James Bond license for North America, and obviously the guy, your main character is called James Bond. Anyway, this is a great game on the Amiga and PC. I played it on PC. It was really good. Definitely check that one out. Okay, so on your left you got Hollywood Collection, another one of these massive compilations. This one's by Ocean. Came out on everything: Amiga, Atari ST, Amstrad, Spectrum, and Commodore 64. It's got 4 games. Those are 4 really good action games. Robocop was a really good arcade conversion. Ghostbusters 2, I don't think this game's as good as the original Ghostbusters game. It has a lot of fun mini games and represents the movie fairly well. Indiana Jones, this is Indiana Jones The Last Crusade. This is the action game. I played that originally on the Commodore 64 and I really liked it. I later played it again on the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis. I think that version is excellent. That's probably my favorite version. And then Batman the movie. This game I played so many times on my Commodore 64. It's great. Really good side-scrolling action, and then go into little car mode and driving sequences. And then to the right you got Fox Fights Back by Ubisoft. Yeah, so this is one of the games that is on the demo tape. And this isn't actually a demo. This is the full game of Fox Fights Back, which I think is pretty cool. If I remember correctly, this game came out a few years earlier as a full retail game, and yeah, you're getting it basically for free. Very cool. It's like a side scroller where like you're a fox that's sick of being hunted, and you go on a rampage and go shoot up all the dogs that are chasing you all the time. And there's lots of little secrets in this game. It's really fun to play. I always liked it back in the day, and still a good game. Okay, on this page is more stuff that's on the demo tape. Okay, so it's probably not the best way to describe this tape as a demo tape, because you actually got 3 full games and 1 demo. But anyway, that's just what they were called. You also got Scorpion and Monster Munch, as well as obviously Fox Fights Back we just looked at. But at the bottom left there, you got Creatures, the playable torture screen demo. This is the first time I'd played Creatures, was with this demo tape, and I couldn't believe how awesome it was. Okay, so we're not going to go through any more about Creatures. I already discussed that a little bit earlier, so let's go to the next page. Okay, on the left you got Plotting. This is a it's another ripoff of Tetris basically, from a Taito arcade game released by Ocean. Yeah, let's just move on. Anyway, on the right you got the Colonel's Bequest on the Amiga. I played this game originally on the PC. I quite enjoyed it. It's like a point and click style adventure game. It's a little bit old school. Like when I say that, I mean it's kind of works very similar in style to Police Quest or King's Quest. So the interface is it's not as slick as you would hope, so it's a little bit clunky to play nowadays. I still think it's quite a cool game. The graphics are really good. It's atmospheric. It's like a murder mystery kind of game. People start dying. It's basically an episode of Murder, She Wrote. Okay, on the left you got an advert for Kickoff 2, the really fun football game. And on the right you got 2 more adventure games. I forgot to mention that this is the think tank section of Zzap. You got East vs West Berlin 1948 by Rainbow Arts. I never played this, so I really know nothing about it. I'm just going by Zzap's description. They say it's like an adventure game, and they say the interface, the point and click interface, is super clunky, and it brings the whole game down. They say it's more frustrating to play than anything else because of the really badly designed menu system, which seems like a shame. And at the bottom there you got Starblade. This is made by the same guys that made the Amiga game Colorado, which I quite enjoyed. This is like a space adventure game. Let's go to the next page and see what Zzap says about it. Okay, and we can see there that Zzap gave Starblade overall 63%, which is average. Overall they just say the gameplay lacks a lot of variety. You're kind of just doing the same thing over and over again. I always thought it was pretty decent. I guess you can try it out and see for yourself. Stealth. And at the bottom there, you got Operation Stealth. This is the review for that game. Talked about it earlier. The point and click adventure game. Zzap gave it a sizzler. They really liked it, like I said earlier. Okay, on the left, you got an advert for the Neverending Story 2, the video game. I never played this. After seeing the Neverending Story 2, the movie in the cinema as a kid, I probably never wanted to play this because it was so bad. So bad compared to the original movie, which was excellent. I did play the original Ocean game, kind of graphic text adventure game, which I thought was great. On the right, you'll see the end of the review for Operation Stealth there. They gave it 92%. Excellent. And below that you got Codename Iceman. This is another Sierra game that they converted to the Amiga. This game was made by Jim Walls. If you don't know who he is, he's a dude that made the Police Quest series for Sierra. And this game, I really want to like this game, but I just really can't. I like the story and kind of setting, but it just, as a game, it's just a real bastard to play. The interface is just, it's kind of runs along the same lines as the original Police Quest games, where it's so procedural and you have to be so specific about things you type in or whatever, that if you even get one word wrong with anything, you just cannot solve anything. This game is really painful to play. I wish somebody would do like a kind of a remake of this game and make it more playable. I think it's a great game if you get rid of the clunky interface. Zzap gave it 60%. They pretty much said most of the same things I've just said about it. I think it's pretty much a universal consensus on this game. Okay, just got some adverts here, moving on, some Zzap merch, advertising, and over there on the right you got an advert for Apprentice, a game that came out on the Amiga by Rainbow Arts. This pretty much follows the standard Rainbow Arts process of making games, where they take something that's already been made and they kind of do their own version of it, maybe a little bit too closely sometimes, and get into hot water over it. This is like a side-scrolling platform game. It has a lot of elements of Wonder Boy and Monsterland kind of deal, so I'm pretty sure that was the game that they were kind of aiming at. Anyway, it runs at a really fast pace, the graphics are nice, and the music's by Chris Helsback, so if you like platform games, check it out. Okay, so as you can see, this article is called Inside the Future, the C64 GS. It's quite a hilarious title because this GS thing became nothing. What this was Commodore's attempt to turn the Commodore 64 into a console gaming system, but the way they went about it is just horrendous. As you can see, the console itself is just a breadbox standard Commodore 64 with a cover slapped over it, which is pretty embarrassing. There was really no attempt to even try to make something unique about it. What a wasted potential. Anyway, the only good thing that came out of this was that a whole bunch of big clunky multi-loader games were put onto cartridge, so they were like minimal loading time, almost nothing, so it made those games way cooler to play. We also got games like Special Criminal Investigations that we saw earlier. They took advantage of the file format, the bigger size, so those are the good things. Everything else, you know, it's kind of painful to talk about this thing, so let's just move on. More advertising and a competition there in Zzap. Anyway, so now we got another preview for an upcoming game at the time. This is for the Total Recall game based on the movie. Now, how they managed to screw this game up twice is beyond me, because this movie is like almost made to be a game. It's there's so many set pieces in it that could have made like such a fun like kind of game out of it, but it was destroyed twice in my opinion. So this is Ocean's attempt at Total Recall, and this came out on, you know, the Amiga, Commodore 64 and 8-bit systems, all that kind of stuff. I played the Commodore one. It's horrendous, it's slow, it's clunky, it's ugly, it's just everything. It's a really bad game. I don't know what's happening with these screenshots to the right here. This is the Commodore 64 version, but this is not what the game looks like. So I'm assuming they went in and redid this whole game, because the game doesn't look anything like this. And if you want to play another terrible version of Total Recall, check out the NES version. That one was made by Acclaim. That game is horrendous. I watched my brother play it as a kid. He played through that thing like a maniac, and I couldn't understand why, because it was so bad. Just avoid anything to do with Total Recall in the video game form. Okay, on the left there you see an advert for Raise. That's that magazine I mentioned earlier that was about to start. And on your right you got Pig in a Poke section. So basically what this is, if you saw the previous video I did on Zzap, this is their kind of cheats and tips section, where they give you tips for certain games and cheats for other games, you know, to give you infinite lives or level skipping and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to skip through this whole section really quickly. I'm just going to skip over it because we're going to get back to the articles, otherwise this video is going to be 20 hours long. Okay, and on your right you got the previews. This is Zzap's preview section. I always love these sections, like going to the back of the book immediately and seeing what's coming out the next month. Obviously, as gamers, you always want to know what's coming out next. So at the top there it says a storm's coming. That's the company's sales curve. They were making a new brand of line or label called Storm. They were responsible for the excellent Silkworm game that came out on the C64. That was a conversion of the arcade game. So that this one that they're promoting here is Saint Dragon. This one is another arcade game. This was a Jellicoe arcade game. It's a side-scrolling shoot 'em up. It's pretty cool. I played it in the arcade. I liked it. The Commodore 64 version, the footage you've seen there, which I played there, I think it's a really good conversion of an arcade game. They did a really good job. It's not a bullet hell massacre fest, so you got a little bit of a chance just to relax and play the game. It's fun. There's a screenshot in the middle there. That's of the Amiga version. That looks really nice. I've honestly never played the Amiga version of it, so I'm just going by that screenshot. It looks very cool. I need to try that out. Okay, so on the left you got, in the middle there, Midnight Resistance by Ocean. They were just talking about the conversion of Midnight Resistance, the arcade game, to the Commodore 64, and that version was about to come out. That version turned out to be excellent. It's extremely good. I'd highly recommend playing that. It's really well done. And next to that you got the impending release of Robocop 2. We saw the advert for it earlier. This is a little bit of a preview, just showing a few more screenshots. This is the Amiga version. Okay, so on the left there you got a little preview up in the top corner for Badlands, the Atari arcade game that was being converted by Domar to C64 and Amiga and a whole bunch of other formats. That game turned out really good. I really enjoyed it a lot. And just below that you got a preview for Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge made by Gremlin. It was about to be released as well. This game turned out to be excellent, especially on the Amiga. It has a really pumping soundtrack as well. I just love it. I highlighted it in one of my episodes of Wired for Sound. I just love the soundtrack to this thing. And on the left you got an advert there for Heatseeker, released by Thalamus for the Commodore 64. This is such a weird game. You like this leg thing and you're jumping around. The advert there, it says, guide the leg on its quest for the flames of zeal. I don't know what the hell that even supposed to mean. The graphics of this game are really nice though, so is everything else. It's really feels like good production values. It's well made. This is a game I don't even know what to say about it. It's just weird. You should definitely give it a go though. See what you think. Let me know in the comments. Okay, and here's a double page spread for the game Venus the Flytrap on the Amiga by Gremlin Graphics. This got a sizzler, which means it's really, really good. I've never played this before. I've just never got around to playing it for whatever reason. They described it as kind of a shoot 'em up, bit of Cybernoid type gameplay elements. They raved over it. They thought it was really, really good. Great variety in gameplay, good graphics, really nice atmospheric music. Game got 90% overall, so definitely should be a one to check out if you haven't. I'm gonna have to check this one out myself. Actually, I probably did if you see gameplay footage. Okay, another two Amiga games. On the left you got Thunderstruck by Millennium. They described this as Defender in 3D, so if you've ever played the old Defender arcade game or the many different versions of that game, then you know exactly what this is like. It's basically a 3D shoot 'em up. They gave it 65% overall. They said graphically it's pretty impressive, but the gameplay variety is pretty thin. And on your right you got Simulacra by Microstyle. This game was programmed by Graft Gold, and this is also kind of a 3D shoot 'em up kind of gameplay, although they said it has exploration aspects. They said the 3D graphics are really good. They move at a really fast pace, and overall it got 88%, so Simulacra just missed out on a sizzler. Okay, so on the left we've got another two more Amiga games. This is Mediocrity City going on here. You got Future Basketball and Plotting. We saw the advert for Plotting earlier. It's like kind of a puzzle game. Future Basketball is basically just a rip-off of Speedball, but just done way worse. So both these games are completely forgettable. I wouldn't suggest playing either of them. The reason why I didn't put gameplay footage here was because of two reasons. Number one, I didn't want to play these games ever again, so I didn't. But number two, more importantly, as you can see, Zzap have got the screenshots mixed up. They got the Plotting screenshot under the Future Basketball section, and vice versa. Now this happened quite often in this magazine, especially later on. I guess it was just whoever was the editor at the time. I remember this happening a lot in these old magazines. CNVG also did it every once in a while. Okay, so on the left you got this really cool advert for Venom Wing on the Amiga. This was released by Thalamus. Thalamus made a lot of shoot 'em ups. This is your standard side-scrolling shoot 'em up, kind of R-type kind of game. I remember the graphics in this thing being really cool. The game was super hard. It's a decent shoot 'em up if you want to play one on your Amiga. And on your right, you got the review for Midnight Resistance. We talked about the Commodore 64 one earlier that hadn't come out yet. This is the Amiga version. This game was released by Ocean. It was made by a group called Special Effects. They also did the Robocop 2 game on the Amiga, which was freaking phenomenal. I love that thing. This is an excellent conversion of the arcade game. They did a bang up job. This game was lucky enough to get some great conversions, especially on the home computers. Okay, so on the left we've got another Amiga game. This is the Gold of the Aztecs. This game they describe as being very similar to an older Psygnosis game called Barbarian. Not Barbarian the Ultimate Warrior, but Barbarian, like a kind of adventure-y game. That game had pretty good graphics, but it was very slow-paced and flick screen. Very much the same kind of game style. I said it's extremely difficult. If you persevere though, a lot of cool graphics, a lot of cool variety, but you're gonna have to really knuckle down and refrain from breaking your joystick in half. Okay, so on the left you got a review for Back to the Future 2 based on the awesome movie. This version was made by Imageworks for the C64 and the Amiga. It got really average reviews, actually a little bit less than average, 59% on the C64 and 64 on the Amiga. It's not very great, it's not like the worst thing ever. I remember playing the C64 version back in the day and I had fun with it. I remember there was a fighting sequence and skateboarding sequence, puzzle elements also. They just didn't like it. I said overall it's just really just a bit of a mess. And here's the last 2 pages of this issue, and you can see it's an advert for Total Recall, game we looked at earlier that was still in a preview stage. Like I said earlier, this game's not very good. There's nothing much more to say about it. I will say that this advert I think is pretty damn cool. I just like the look of it. Okay, and on the back cover here we got an advert for System 3's Ninja Remix. Now if you don't know what this is, it's basically a remix of The Last Ninja 2. I think the reason they made this is because it came out on cartridge and it came out on the Commodore GS. I think that's the only reason. I don't see any reason why you would remake The Last Ninja 2, especially considering the game only came out a year or two earlier. Basically what this is, it's got slightly more detailed graphics on a few little things here and there, especially the menu around the screen. The music has also been remixed for no apparent reason. I'm not sure why. The original Matt Gray music is absolutely perfect. The remix music is not bad, don't get me wrong, it's still great. I guess System 3 just wanted to release something for the GS because they thought it was going to be the new big thing. If you want to play Last Ninja 2, play it. If you want to play the remix is also pretty good, so it's a win-win for everybody. And that brings this issue of Zzap to a close. Okay, and that is it for this issue of Zzap64. I hope you had a lot of fun. I hope you got to see a lot of games that you might never have seen before. Thanks for joining me, Bash-B at 64K. If you could like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you next time for another episode of the Zine Files. Cut to credits.